Let's see. Nobody knows what that is.
There we are recording.
We're recording?
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
great. Okay, so welcome everybody. My name is Mike Wickers. I'm the mayor of Cottonwood Heights. Today is July 5th, 2022. Hopefully everybody had a great holiday, and this is the Cottonwood Heights City Council work session. The first item on our agenda will be a review of our business meeting. So we will begin tonight's meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Council Member Doug Peterson to lead us in that effort. We will have a citizen comment period that I think might be busy, might not, who knows. Next, we will actually have a public comment period that will address specifically the Fort Union rezone request for 3526 East Fort Union Boulevard. And we're actually going to have, that's not a staff report, so we're going to have Mike Johnson give us a little bit of background about what that request is. I think we're all pretty much aware of it.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. We went over the summary of it in the last meeting. I will plan to give a brief introduction for any of the public that may be present in the business meeting. In the work session, I have everything. I'm happy to answer any questions the council has. Otherwise, I'll just plan on that overview right before we take comment.
So any questions or comments? That will lead us into our first legislative action tonight, which will be, we don't have to do it. We can pass on it if we want, but it will be either Ordinance 385A approving or Ordinance 385D denying the rezone. So this is a little different from the last time where we began with the general plan ordinance change, and this would be specifically just for the rezone. So if you all have any questions or comments you want to talk about now, we can do that.
I know that as far as density goes, it's essentially the same subject that we took up a couple of months ago. I know that the setbacks change with the ROZC, with the residential office. And I believe the current proposals to remove all but residential uses there.
Correct. Just show you really fast here. Go back one slide. This is the zoning proposed. So yeah, it's residential office with zoning conditions, and basically the zoning conditions are just to eliminate any potential use that's not residential. So single family or two family dwellings plus home occupations would be the only allowed uses. This is what the applicant has sent as a diagram for how that would look. Developed on site. It just increases those setbacks from what you saw previously with the R2 request. The reason there's no general plan is because the land use designation here is residential office, so a general plan amendment would not be necessary here.
What is the side setbacks on that?
The interior side,
25, 30.
There, right there. Yep.
those I think 10 feet. You can see on the side there. They have to be 10 feet. But then when they're adjacent to
20.
single family, they have to be 25 on the side and 30 in the rear. And that was 5 feet before, so a 20-foot greater setback there.
And just for clarification, and correct me if I'm wrong, on single family, if you had a single family home.
Yeah, single family, this 25 could be an 8.
Would be, yeah, an 8.
Still built at 35 feet tall.
Massing wise, it doesn't really change if your envelope's a little bit smaller, but I mean, still go to the same height.
Same height, much different setbacks though, even than R18.
We haven't seen it. Go ahead. Scott.
Sorry, when we had this was denied before as just on R2. I didn't look up the minutes to find out because we had reasons. One of them was that we are currently in a general plan process, and it would be better to wait. Were there any other findings that you remember that we
there were additional
Do you
findings.
have those handy, or do you know what the date was? And I'll look at the minutes.
Not in here.
It would be from the previous,
It's in the staff report that was in the packet.
okay?
I believe the previous findings were in there. But it was the general plan. It was,
From
I
our,
believe the massing, the setbacks and the proximity that R2 could get was brought up as one of the concerns there.
Like, have we ever?
And if not, I
seen-
can find those for you, Scott.
yeah, I'm just curious, what, from our meeting, what?
Mhm.
Because we did have findings for denial. And I'll see if I can, do you know what the date we acted on this was?
Yeah, just a second. It was March 2nd.
Yeah, I'll go find those minutes.
Wait, no, that was the planning commission, excuse me. So it was I'll find it here in just a minute.
Okay.
Have we seen anything what a residential layout would look like, or is only seeing a commercial?
This would be residential.
Twin homes.
It would only allow 2-family dwellings.
So,
Right, but I mean a single family, what we.
No, because that's not been proposed, but they could come do that without coming through that would just be straight to building permit.
Gotcha.
No public meeting or anything required for single family, even to subdivide. So I'll give the full overview of the proposal, but that's that.
I'm just curious, I want to make sure that we're still being congruent with the findings. I know there's been some change in sentiment from the neighbors, but I don't know that it was enormous, so that's why I'm kind of curious as to.
If I may interject, my understanding from the constituents in District 4 is that their preference is for all of the area along Fort Union Boulevard east of 2700 East to remain R18. That's their preference. Now, the fact that the current land use has this parcel as residential office, you know, in essence supersedes their desire that it had been, they would have preferred that it had been all kept R18. So I just want to go on record that in the long term, that's what their preference is, that they've expressed to me as their representative.
Well, we went through this entire area 2 years ago,
2019.
2019, and did a complete general plan update that was fairly thorough, and that's when this got put into place. So it's not been a long time.
I do understand that. However, there's about 90 residents who
I
felt left out of
understand
that
those.
process that have made their voices known.
Do you want me to read some of the findings?
yeah,
from the
go ahead,
previous?
for sure.
So some of the findings were the land use change that indicated that the eastern portion of Fort Union is a transitional area. Does not have the same character as the lower western portion. The city was in the process of updating the general plan and was considering whether it would be expedient to change the zoning. And the dramatic growth and development have warranted caution in making land use changes. Those were some of the issues.
So any other,
And setbacks
yeah,
as well.
questions or comments specific to this?
That general plan amendment process was actually initiated by citizens. It took us a little bit to get in there, but we did go through there quite thoroughly. And all of it had been residential office or something similar.
It was mixed use.
Mixed use, was that what? And
Most of it was changed down to single family residential, low density residential, and then some was left residential office. This was one of them. And the properties that remained residential office were those that have they're not corner lots. They don't have neighborhood access. They front exclusively onto Fort Union Boulevard.
So the hurdle to me that I see is that we're in the middle of this general plan update. So I think we've seen from how many people attended the first or the last meeting that we had that perhaps people are more engaged than they were in the past, and that they're really trying to learn and get involved Randy Whitehead's played a role in this, into helping people educate themselves on what they can do and how general plans do get updated. And so that would be my hesitation in approving this rezone, is that we are still in the middle. I don't think that's 100% fair to the applicant, but one of the options could be possibly to educate him with, how long this process will take and where the end point of it would be, so that it's not just hanging out there as a possibility as well. So, but I think that's where I would probably hang my vote right now, is that we're in the middle of this general plan update, and that would probably supersede me changing zoning as of today.
On that's why I had brought that up, because that was, honestly, that was one of the findings that I had kind of based that on.
So if I may just make sure I'm following where that then leads us. So based on your comment, Mayor, you are favoring that we keep the current zoning, which is residential office. No, I'm sorry.
So you kind of have to separate the general plan zoning from what the current zoning is. So our general plan does have the residential office as a future use.
But because we're in the process
We're
of
in-
possibly changing it, you would like to hold on the approval.
I would probably lean to denying the rezone until the general plan update is completed.
Has those in the neighborhood been proposed this plan?
Yeah, we had a comment.
We had-
last meeting, that was saying that, I mean,
They were
I mean-
appreciative of the setbacks being
right,
greater.
and that's an improvement, and it is congruent with the general plan as it is now.
But that could change.
But her comment was still that the
They would
neighborhood
prefer it
would
to be
prefer
residential,
R1A.
single family, right?
And perhaps education of enhanced setbacks for any changes would be something that the rest of the neighborhood would be appreciative of learning during this process.
Well, they'd have
So-
Okay, do you just want to make sure, because this is denied, they could turn around tomorrow and submit a permit for a house 8 feet away
Yeah.
from. That's 35 feet tall to a right angle.
A single family.
Not that they will, but they could do that and they're entitled to it
Right,
today.
right now, that R1 is the entitlement.
Correct.
Which,
So we have a public comment period on this issue. And so the option is, as we get into the business meeting, that we listen to that. And then I hear motions to approve ordinance 385A or 385D, one approving the rezone or one denying it. So we don't have to make our decision right now on what we think the course should be. We can wait
What is
until we
the-
hear some public
I
comment.
guess what is the most important thing to the neighbors, the 90+ people? What is it the setbacks? Is it the density or I guess that's what I would like to hear feedback from those same people that did not want this to go the direction it was before.
Yeah,
Ingress, egress, all those things like that too.
I don't remember how many people signed that thing. Was it 90?
Approximately.
Approximately 90 people signed it to keep the zoning R18. I know one of the concerns was setbacks and that's actually been addressed for the betterment of what would happen with, like what Mike said, they could do a project tomorrow that's 8 feet away. And so anyway, there's two sides to this issue. and
So
I think
if
it's
it
important
was
to keep-
kept R18, then on this 0.95 acre lot, that 0.95 acre lot could not be subdivided into 3 different.
Absolutely could,
Oh,
yeah.
good.
yeah,
3
But that,
single family homes.
A subdivision less than 10 lots does not require any public hearing. It's a procedural matter as long as the lots meet the R18, in this case, standards, 8,000 square feet, 70 feet of frontage, all the other requirements, then that's approved.
We can, the other option is to go ahead with the public comment period tonight and not vote, right, Mike?
You can table.
We can table.
put it out, 2 weeks or the 3 weeks before our next meeting.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I think it'd be fair to give them time to digest this.
This did go to planning commission June 1st. There was public notice there. So this has been through planning commission for the second time again. And then it came in front of you.
Right, has
last-
actually made it through
the
that
last work
process
session.
pretty quickly, so.
Planning commission is looking at, does it meet what guidelines we have in our codes, right? So I mean, they're not making.
Well, they're the land use authority, so they make the recommendation to you.
And
And I think they use the general plan as a tool.
Yeah.
And they could very well offer up a denial, there's nothing that's
Yeah.
outside.
Okay.
They're not compelled to offer it just simply because it matches, they could still recommend a denial because it's a legislative action, not a administrative, it's not like a conditional use.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Yeah, this one, I appreciate the effort that's gone through there, yeah, well, I'll be interested to hear the public comment. There may be something there that would warrant another couple of weeks.
Maybe we'll, I guess we'll make a decision after the public comment period to move on or table a vote. So everybody good with that? Okay, next tonight in the business meeting, we will be considering resolution 2022-33, approving entry into the third amendment to an independent contractor agreement with Greg Curtis, DBA Curtis Consulting. This is our city lobbyist that works with the state legislature to protect our city's interests. And so we rely heavily on them for funding grant opportunities and then for the laws that try to get passed at the state level. Tim, anything?
The amount per the contract is going to be the same. We negotiated that down several years ago. It's going to be the same for both of these two lobbyist groups. 30,000 for the Greg Curtis group, 36,000 for the Capitol Hills partners. And they both play an important role, differing roles. One focused more on funding, the other one focused on day-to-day issues related to legislation. And we feel it's an important need. And like I say, it's not increasing the cost, so we're recommending approval.
So that covers actually resolution 2022-33 and 2022-34. So both of those items will be individual votes, but they're the same thing.
I have a question. Have we ever done an ROI on that? Because I know we get a lot back for that. I mean, is it 10 times what or more?
It'd probably be kind of hard to judge, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean,
I'm just saying if we had no one, obviously, or if we had,
the day-to-day legislative items is hard to quantify.
I understand that.
But just in the past 4 years since I've been here with the funding side of the lobbyists, we've been able to get millions of dollars for projects here.
Yeah.
One being the parking structure, which not that the money comes to us, but it's for the community interest. It goes through the UDOT process, and then the other one was for trails. So both of those, one I believe was 13 million, the other one was 1.4. So that's just in 4 years of what we've done.
And I'm well aware of that. I just wanted the public to know that, in the old days, before I understood it, lobbyists had a name that wasn't what it really is. And for us, I think it would be, it's a wonderful investment.
We could in reality rely on the league relationship that we have, League of Cities, but these two lobbyists are looking out for our interests specifically.
We could never
And
do
so,
it like they do it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Thanks, Doug. That was actually really good to clarify that. Thank you. Next tonight is a consideration of resolution 2022-35, approving appointments to the Planning Commission. And I'm going to have Tim address this, as this is not a staff report either.
Yeah, so I submitted the information to you, which includes the resolution with the districts that the individuals are part of, as well as the term expirations. We've had a lot of reappointments of planning commission members, but the two that are being considered tonight are new because the two individuals were term limited out. And so the two appointments include District 4, which would be Sean Steinman, and then also Mike Shelton, which would be a District 1 at large. It's stated in our code that, and there's as far as geographic representation, having fairly equal amount of representation from each district. And so this would mean with these appointments, 2 from District 4, 2 from District 3, 2 from District 2, and then we just have 1 from District 1, and we are seeking another individual to represent that. So I've submitted information about these 2 individuals. What the focus of the planning commission members is really individuals that have broad interest of the community in mind, as well as living in the community. I feel both of these individuals are very qualified for this. One individual, Sean Steinman, is a business owner, a resident. His kids are involved in parks and recreation things. I think he brings broad interest. And then Mike Shelton has a background, significant background in public interest. They both have expressed interest in being part of this, and I'm recommending approval of their appointment.
Question on at large, that would be Mike Shelton, is that right? And so we'd still have a possible representative for 1, or do we always have 2, or would the at large kind of filter over into 1?
Who fills the alternate spots
There are alternate opportunities
as well?
I
Are
see.
they empty?
I believe there is one that is empty on that. So we'll be looking at some of those.
I just want to make sure 1 is represented.
Well, yeah, it was a little surprising that we just 1, so one of those alternates probably
We are, yeah, we have
Looking
one
for
other.
a
One other seat.
specific,
Yeah.
a specific one from District 1.
So is it possible to have, since Mike Shelton lives in District 1, could he take the position of the District 1 Planning Commissioner seat so that the at-large position would be the available position, so that those within the city who do not reside in District 1 but might have an interest in serving on the Planning Commission could make application for that?
We could do that. The one thing though is there are some limitations on the amount of individuals from one district that can be included.
Do any of the currently do any of the districts, have they met that limitation?
They could, if depending on who is appointed.
So
'Cause we have-
would someone from District 3 be able to apply for the at-large position?
I would have to see who we have as alternates right now. Mike, do you know who we have?
I'll
as
pull it up.
alternates? Pulling it up.
But anybody should be.
We have
Apply, it's a matter of whether they fit the requirements to.
two current members, 1 at large and 1 not from District 3.
And then alternates, you have the list of the
The
alternates.
alternate is Jonathan Ebeler. He is District 2 at large.
So basically, every district, we require 1 member from each district to do representation. And then we have 4 at large that we would like to see an at large from every district as well, to really equal out. This is the representation, right?
It's 3 at large.
3 at large, okay, and then an alternate.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we're also restricted on the number that you can have from one
From one
district.
So who are our current at-large members?
So current at large is a District 4, Jesse Allen.
Jesse Allen, who's the chair.
Lucy Anderson, that's District 3 at large. Jonathan Ebler, which is District 2 at large, and then Mike Shelton is who we're proposing as District 1 at large.
So the
And what-
maximum is, or, sorry, keep going.
Oh, I just was, so now that we've looked at it in greater detail, are we finding then that a person in District 3 would not be eligible to apply for the at-large because you have Lucy Anderson serving at-large for District 3? Is that, am I?
Anyone could submit interest in an application at any time. Whether they are proposed to go in follows along, just keeping them spread out. When that may be now, or it may be in 2 years or 3 years, when an eligible spot comes forward for that.
Yeah, and we have alternates that could be appointed as an alternate that could be potentially from District 3.
So I guess my specific question is that is if the council were to approve of the idea of having Mike Shelton serve as a District 1 representative versus categorized at large. If then someone from District 1, District 2, 3, or 4, if they make application, would they be considered an eligible applicant? My understanding in reading code is that what makes you eligible is that you live in Cottonwood Heights and obviously a certain district within Cottonwood Heights. Beyond that, there's no particular level of education or experience that warrants whether you could serve on the planning commission. So that's what I want, not only I'd like to understand, but I think perhaps people in the public would also like to better understand that.
So we need to know.
I think the answer is
Before we
yes,
move
but
on.
that person would need to be the alternate. They could not, until someone that was non-alternate was not serving anymore, they would have to remain an alternate because that'd be the third person from one specific district on the commission.
And right now, we only have one person from District 1.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
proposed.
And
Yeah.
I'm looking this, I finally found this list, so it's, 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 8. And that's striking me not quite correct. We've had one person from each district. We don't have a District 1 person assigned now. And then we had 3 at large with alternates as well.
1 alternate, 3 at large.
Right, well, then the way that this is written on this list in the resolution is incorrect because Mike Shelton would actually be being put in as the District 1 because we have 3 other at-larges on the list. So I'm just looking at the resolution we have from the packet. Is that, this is what?
I
this
think
is-
you're correct on that.
So
So it'd have to
So
be Mike
which-
Shelton, District 1,
Right.
not at large.
he would not be at large because there's no one in the District 1 spot. And I know we had at least one person specifically designated from each district with the at-larges covering 3 of the 4 other districts.
Okay.
And then the alternates, we could kind of pick how that needed to fit in, but yeah, I think this is a typo on this resolution. Is that?
I believe Craig Bevan.
Yeah, unless we change something, Shane, and I'm not on it. But we had 4 of the planning commissioners, 1 was specific to each. This list is only showing 3 districts with the designated, and it should be 4.
Or
That's
you're
okay.
saying, are you saying 4 at-large members?
No, it should be 1 from each district, and then the 3 more at large.
So basically, it would mean taking the at-large
Off
behind
of-
the Mike
off of
Shelton
Mike.
if he's appointed.
Yeah, so this resolution may need just a slight.
So I'm still a little confused. So is it that we can have only a maximum of 3 at-large members on the planning commission at a given time, or can we have 4?
You have 3
3 with
active
an alternate.
voting members. The alternates play a position if a regular member is absent or unable to attend a
Well-
meeting, and then you can have someone there
Okay,
to.
and I'm sorry, if we have a total of 8 members and we have 4 districts, then we
Oh.
have 4, we have 4 full
There's
members.
7 members.
There's only a total of 7 members
The alternates only participate
when someone
if
is going to
there's
be
a regular
absent
member that's not available,
for a given meeting.
then they can step
And
in.
currently, and so we have 2 alternates, and do we have those positions filled right now?
Jonathan Ebler is an alternate.
Jesse Allen is an alternate.
Well, I have Jesse Allen as District 4.
Oh, is he? Oh, okay.
It's not at large, the alternates.
Oh, alternate. Yeah, Jonathan Ebler is an alternate. That he is.
There's only one alternate.
Yeah,
But he's
So there's
listed,
only,
he's listed as an at-large in this list here.
That's wrong.
Then we need to put ALT at large, I guess.
Okay,
So
all right. Is it-
so there's
that's-
only 1 alternate
Yes.
that
Correct.
serves.
correct.
Okay, and we have
I
that
think
full,
that's-
so we do not have a space for an alternate. Okay,
Is the alternate always at large?
typically, because we.
You can move around
But they can be shifted into.
into a position.
and how long does Jonathan Elbers,
That's
when
till
does his term
24.
end? till through June of 2024.
He's in his first term right now, I think.
I see.
Yeah.
The next two that come up are Jesse Allen. Is that landscaper Jesse Allen? What?
Yeah, our,
He's now in District 4.
I think there's 2 District 3s as well in a year that will come open, right?
Wow, yeah, you're right. That's
Dan Mills and Lucy Anderson. But they are eligible, I believe, for reappointment. That you're talking
Both
about
of them,
2022.
yeah.
Yeah.
So are we talking about putting alternate Jonathan Ebler as alternate then? That was my mistake, right?
yeah, because that would be the 8th.
Correct.
And then
And then we would need a 1.
Mike Shelton is just 1, not at large. 4, 5, 6, that still doesn't, that count still doesn't work.
Well, we have an open slot for 1, I think. If, Mike is going to be 1 at large. We're going to have a open slot.
Then we would have, yeah, we need another number of District 1 if it's not gonna be Mike.
I don't want to be underrepresented.
So the approving appointments to the planning commission, does there need to be an adjustment that made before we vote tonight for Mike Shelton moving to an alternate? I mean, to a District 1 instead of an
He
alternate?
can stay there and then just get a District 1 appointment in the future. And
Okay.
that would give each of the districts two
With the change being is Mr. Ebler would be an alternate at large.
right.
Okay.
Well, let's, so. I know, Ellen, you said you had some, did you want to do that?
Yeah,
in the
do you,
business
I
meeting?
think I may bring that up at the business meeting. I think that might
Okay,
be a
yeah,
better
that's
time,
totally
if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next on our agenda is, for tonight is consideration of resolution 2022-36, approving entry into the First Amendment to a consulting agreement with Geostrata Engineering and Geosciences. Mike, you want to address that real quick?
yeah, thank you. I'll introduce it. Tim Thompson from Geostrata is on Zoom as well, if you have questions for him.
Be a panelist.
Geostrata is the geologic engineering and geotechnical engineering consulting firm that the city utilizes. Most commonly for technical reviews when development projects are submitted that are within sensitive lands areas of the city. They come in as a third-party contracted consultant to review what types of geotechnical engineering studies are needed, like fault studies or slope stability analyses. And I'll go through SLEDs in a minute, which kind of plays well into this. But they've been under contract with us most recently since 2013. So this amendment doesn't really change their function and their role as that third-party expert consultant. It just updates their fee schedule, which actually is, most of the costs have gone up, between $15 and $30 per hour in the last 9 years, which seems pretty good. So staff recommends just continue or approval of the amendment to the contract. It's a contract that can be terminated at any time in writing by either party, so there's not a hard end date on it. And I do want to state on the fees, the sensitive lands ordinance requires that if a developer or landowner is proposing work that requires that expert review, those fees are passed along to that developer. So a lot of the fees, unless they're done for city initiated projects, a lot of those fees are recovered through development or permitting fees.
Yeah. Thank you, Mike. It's interesting. We have a lot of great citizens that this is a big issue for, and I believe it's an important issue. And because we are looking at some SLEDs ordinance changes, I felt that we needed to make sure as a council that we're really educated. So if we're going to approve anything that changes, we need to be on top of this issue. I was able to meet with Mr. Thompson. He came in and met with Tim and I and Mike, and boy, he was super engaging and listened and just was a great piece of information. It gave us great information to consider and to try to become somebody, we're not going to be subject matter experts, but we can get grasp a lot of these issues that we're looking at.
When you say we, you mean the council.
The council, yeah. Tim, I don't know if you want to say anything before we move on, but
I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
I said the gist of this is just changing a lot of the rates. So that if
Yes.
they do the work, it gets, I think they've done a great job. They were very instrumental in helping us get sleds put in, which at the time was very progressive and comprehensive, a lot more comprehensive than what we had been running under prior to having it in. I know that there's been a lot of updates within the county and the area and other people's ordinances, so a good review every now and then to make sure we're up to snuff on where we should be, I think is worthwhile.
yeah, absolutely.
Tim, I have a question. I know we're not unique, but because we are up against the mountains, is the Geostrata surprising to you, what we've been seeing in Dover and up at the gravel pit and things like that?
No, I don't think I've seen anything in any of the last reviews that I've done that have been surprising. Most of the development along the bench is dealing with exactly the same issues. Any city that's footprint goes up into the foothills. I haven't seen any of our reviews that we've done where there's been a unique amount of hazard that's impacted what the city's had to deal with. So I think it's pretty typical of this area, the type of things that the city's dealing with.
I just know up at Dover, they were quite surprised about what they saw there, the uniqueness of some of that, but maybe that was just the opinion of those that were in the trench when they were showing us.
Yeah, some of the developers, some of the individuals at Ivory, for instance, in that case, have hired these studies to be done before, but haven't actually gone out with the geological survey and stood in the trench and actually seen what those fault features look like when they're encountered in a trench. So to them, it was something that was, I think, made it more real. What they would normally see in a report, they actually got a chance to see in the field. The fault features that were in those trenches were not unanticipated by, the exact location. That's why you look, because you're not exactly sure where you're going to find the exact features. But I think the type of features they found, they were pretty typical of what they were anticipated in that general area.
Right. I think location. And that's what they were a little bit nervous about. And that's what we were able to be down in those trenches was fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
that's why we have this ordinance.
Yes.
Yeah. I think Doug and I both had the opportunity to actually jump down in the trench and look at faults. It was fascinating
Well,
experience.
Riley's not here to say that. He did the heavy rescue out.
Yeah. Okay, well, great. We'll move on. So, and then the last item that we will consider tonight is resolution 2022-37, which is initiating review of compensation for the city's elected and appointed officers, providing a public hearing concerning any proposed modifications to such compensation. Tim, anything?
Yeah, we talked about this in the budget process that we just undertook and looked at market studies related to council compensation, mayor compensation. And so the process that we have to go through is through a resolution. You have to make a determination to express the intent to amend both the statutory and elective office compensation, and it orders a public hearing date and time, which we've set for July 19th if you approve this resolution. So we'll have a hearing, and then we'll have then you can consider that at the next meeting. But this resolution basically sets the
This
hearing.
is just setting the hearing, exactly.
And when was that last visited, Tim?
2013.
It's been 9 years. I know some people have looked at that. I know in 2013, the previous time we had done it was in 2005, probably. And it was like, because of the changes with COLAs and other things here and there, what's actually written there is not exactly the same. And so there's a little bit of misperception on what that is. So I think it's a good time to just, 9 years certainly seems like a reasonable time to change it. Things have changed in the city as well. We were in a different mode in startup, and even in 13, things were a little bit different. So the mayor spot specifically as Kelvin was originally told, it claims that it's part-time, but the reality is that it's not. And I think that that should be taken care of.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, well, so we will, and then we will approve the consent calendar tonight, will be the meetings for both 21st and 22nd in the closed session. Okay, so the first item with our staff reports is a SLED's ordinance update. Are we done that? Mike, did you want to talk about that?
I have not done this
Okay,
yet. No,
great.
this is just a work session item. Thank you. As I think everyone is aware, the city is in the process of a city initiated update and amendment to the sensitive lands ordinance. This ordinance it's 100+ pages long and highly technical. So we are not by any means going to talk about this all in one night. And I don't think it's possible to do that. So it's still under consideration by the planning commission right now, and will come to the council formally at some point in the future, probably in the next couple months. But we wanted to start having discussions about it and get it out there in front of the council, so it's easier to understand and digest when the full amendment gets to you for full consideration. So I want to preface this discussion with, tonight we're only going to focus on the current sensitive lands ordinance and a general overview of what it is, what does SLEDs mean, what's in the ordinance, what's the background of it, and then we'll get into next steps. And I think this is scheduled a few meetings out. So we'll begin to talk about the proposed amendments and the rationale for why changes are being made and everything like that as we move forward. But if we do it all in one night, everyone clouds over after a half hour because it's really technical.
And we want to make sure that Councilman Newell gets the full experience.
Yeah, absolutely. The planning commission has been at it since January in meetings. Every single meeting they've talked about it consistently from January until now, and they're still not done with it. So that gives you an example of kind of the breadth of what it tries to accomplish. So tonight we thought it'd be good to give just catch everyone up and give a brief overview, a simplified overview of what the ordinance is in the first place. It was originally developed by the city kind of in place of the county's FCAUS overlay, which was Foothill Canyon Overlay Zone, which kind of regulated development in the foothill areas up and down the eastern bench of Salt Lake County. However, Cottonwood Heights expanded its ordinance, and it's not just a canyons overlay ordinance now. It covers all different types of sensitive lands hazards that could be present anywhere in the city that's under development. And I'll go over what those hazards are in a few slides. It's a very technical ordinance that imposes special design, engineering, and development standards for properties located in areas prone to various hazards. Being in this geographic location, it's an ideal location, but it also comes with those associated hazards that you see. We have multiple creeks running through the city, which creates groundwater and potential flooding hazards. We've got mountains nearby and steep slopes all over the place. And all of those things are beautiful, but also come with risks that this ordinance tries to mitigate and account for as much as possible. The regulations are designed to ensure that development in these sensitive areas is done in a way that protects health, safety, and welfare and mitigates any negative impacts of potential hazards. And it also aims, this is right out of the purpose section of the ordinance, it aims to preserve environmental quality and natural features and adequately accommodate access to public lands in a way that ensures minimal natural disturbance.
I apologize, but do you have any when FCAUS was originally put into place?
I don't know, but I know a lot of the city, especially the eastern bench of the city, was developed.
I know, yeah,
pre-FCAUS,
I was just curious.
A lot of what we have is maybe not exactly what would be allowed today. So where we see sensitive lands come into play a lot of times is when someone in an overlay zone goes to do an addition or a remodel or a major renovation to their house.
Well, that's what
oftentimes they have to go through.
If it came up after a lot of the Upper East Bench of the city was. built,
I think
because-
so, yeah, I think it did. I can find out the answer for you. So background and scope. The sensitive lands, and I do want to step back. When we say sleds, that means this: sensitive lands, evaluation and development standards. It's just easier to say sleds, but that's the acronym. That's what it stands for. There's a whole chapter in the ordinance that is just this, and it's 19.72. This ordinance is used throughout various stages of every development project. That can be used in the entitlement phase, during a rezone, during a conditional use entitlement. We use it there. We use it during regular building permit applications. If an application comes in and we notice it's something that's in a sensitive lands area, then this ordinance kicks into effect. And it's also utilized throughout the construction process. A lot of times there are requirements during development of observing foundations and observing engineering and construction practices to make sure it meets what it's required to meet.
Is it the UGS that determines what falls into a sensitive land area?
No, the UGS is used for certain hazards, specifically fault lines. But the city has kind of determined through there's a technical and professional rationale for why we've included areas in sensitive lands. But the UGS we use their data mainly to identify where potential fault hazards may be located.
Okay.
But we may use FEMA data to identify where flooding issues may be, and we may use our own, radar imaging to be able to tell where steep slope hazards may be. So it's a combination of a lot of different resources. UGS is definitely one of them.
Okay.
So it's a technical and wide-ranging ordinance that regulates development, requires study and mitigation of all kinds of potential hazards. And a lot of times it's not every hazard on one site. It's one hazard or two on one side, and it may be a completely different thing on another. So the ordinance covers a lot of different things and there's a lot of moving pieces. The city's development review committee administers the requirements of the chapter, and the DRC is a staff committee consisting of staff representatives from city planning, public works and engineering, building, fire, and then other experts as needed. That can include the city attorney, geologic hazard specialists like Geostrata that we use often, et cetera, as specific issues are identified. So this is just going through the ordinance without going into any detail. These are the different sections of the ordinance, and this tries to demonstrate the various contents of the current ordinance and what it does. It establishes general development standards for any area. This is any area anywhere in the city in sensitive lands. And that includes slope disturbance limits, how much you can cut into a slope and at what point can you not disturb a slope, and does it have to remain unbuildable? Impervious surface requirements for grading or for drainage and erosion control. Grading, drainage, and erosion control standards. This a good example of this that's relevant is the large property that is owned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that was graded out. Normally, the property of that size would need to go through this grading, drainage, and erosion control standards, which is why they've been stopped and told to go do that. So there are requirements for that on any site in sensitive
Do
lands.
we have penalties, if I may ask, for the fact that that property has been developed without a building permit? I know it's been a stop order, but
Well, the penalty is to stop and do it, and if there's non-compliance, then it escalates through the enforcement process. Cut and fill regulations. So how much soil you can remove or fill, and how you have to compact fill when you're adding fill to a site. Vegetation, revegetation requirements, especially on sloped areas. Fire protection and access standards, and this includes fire breaks and wildland urban interface requirements. Standards for hillside trails. Any trail on a hillside has to be built a certain way to avoid erosion and runoff and things like that. Architectural design requirements. And then it goes on to establish minimum qualifications of any professionals being used for outside reviews. Means you can't just go use anyone to do your outside review. They have to be qualified, and there's a lot of detail there for what that requires. And it establishes the procedure for how hazards are identified, reviewed, and what process they have to follow to get out of the SLEDS process and onto any sort of approval.
Real quick, Mike, I'm
Yeah.
just gonna mention Sean, Councilmember Newell is actually online with us now.
Great.
So,
Hello, everyone.
hi, Sean.
The specific hazards, beyond the general development standards and everything else I just referenced, there's a whole appendix that's almost as long or probably longer than the ordinance itself. That includes a really detailed set of requirements for each of the hazards you see on screen, and how to identify them and how to study them and what the study needs to show, and what the limitations are of development around each type of hazard. So those are listed here. Surface fault rupture hazards, which is fault lines, slope stability hazards, liquefaction, which is soil stability in general caused by ground shaking. So that's a fault related type of hazard. Debris flow hazards, where you have mountains and drainage channels coming down from canyons. You have a potential for debris flow during big storm events, and we review for that and impose requirements for that. Rockfall hazards, which is kind of similar. Groundwater source protection. This deals with development largely along creek areas. Riparian corridor and watershed protection. So that's the areas around creeks and making sure we're preserving those areas and the natural ecosystem there and limiting disturbance of that. And then looking at sites for high groundwater and flooding, which we do often, especially down Doug's district has a lot of this down off Siesta. Anywhere you have a creek, you're going to have a potential for high groundwater, and we look at all of that. This is an example. When you take all these hazards, and there's two overlays on the screen, the pink there underneath is what's in the ordinance today, and the blue is what's proposed in the amendment. So you can see the sensitive lands overlay area is getting bigger. And that's just because we have better outside data and information available to us to know that we need to expand some of these study areas. But if you put together all of these hazards here, using all the different resources we use to identify areas that may be vulnerable to all of these hazards, and you map that, this is what you get. You get pretty much the whole periphery of the city is potentially prone to some type of hazard or another. This doesn't mean a hazard exists in all these areas. It just means if there's a property that comes in for a building permit or a rezone or conditional use or whatever else that's in one of these areas, we require further analysis to identify whether a hazard exists. And if it does, then we go into that full SLEDS process.
May I ask a question? So how do you prioritize these elements and the review of areas that are prone, not just for new development, but for existing residential areas? How do you prioritize it? How do you systematically, what kind of procedural process do you have?
Yeah, so it's every hazard is prioritized the same. They're all in the ordinance and we administer the ordinance. Generally, how it works functionally is we get a permit application in, and that part of the review of that permit goes to the city engineer, who will flag the property for a potential hazard and say, here's what we need to do.
Okay, so I'm not talking about new development. Let me give you an example. I've lived in my home on Golden Hills Avenue for 22 years. A creek flows through my backyard, Little Willow Stream. It comes out of Deaf Smith's Canyon. There is an irrigation company that diverts water about a quarter mile upstream from Kings Hill Drive. In the 22 years that I've lived there, the irrigation company, we've researched it, we've reached out to the city, we've tried to understand why the irrigation company, which according to records shows that they are to take no more than 50% of the water. They have not changed the diversion during the irrigation season. They have it wide open, but even with their diversion wide open, the water flows beyond the creek. It doesn't get down to where I live at 3618 Easterly location below it. But the point that I'm getting to is that diversion is not being monitored. Now, I don't hold the city to that. We've been trying to get the state to come and intervene. This has been for, as I said, many years. But our concern related to what you just had on the screen called flow hazards is that should that irrigation company choose to close the diversion or do something that allows the water to build up, and then there's a sudden surge that comes down, the debris has not been cleared in the 22 years that I've lived there. Again, we've requested support on this. So my question is not related to economic development. It's related to looking out for existing residents. How do you prioritize it? This could be rather catastrophic for all of us who have that creek flowing on our properties, which is a considerable number of people in District 4. And so that's my question, not new development, but looking out for the existing residents in these flow potential disaster areas. Or,
Well-
you know, clogging of the what's the word, helping with somebody, the
flow.
flow,
Oh, water.
what are those called, Doug?
Well, it's an irrigation company, I think. Is
no,
what-
but I'm talking about
The
like
diversion,
the,
yeah, there's a,
Ditch,
well, what are they
waterways,
called?
The waterway.
well,
it's the gate that comes down.
No,
Is that what
I'm
you're
not talking about at the diversion site. I'm talking about as it flows downstream and it goes underneath Wasatch Boulevard,
Oh,
et
the
cetera.
aquifer.
Oh,
No.
come on, Scott.
Draw a picture, like.
It sounds like, it looks
Yeah,
like
sounds
this.
like this.
No, there's a name for
I mean,
the,
the county has a team that keeps their waterways clear so that they can be free flowing and not have that issue. They put that into place after, I believe, the 83 floods.
okay, well, I can tell you in 22 years, there's been no work done in that way. So I don't
It's
know
a
whether the buck
complicated
stamps
and
with
very
the
specific question,
county
but
or.
But I do want to, none of this is done out of a desire for economic development. So I don't know where that inference has come from, but this is an ordinance that frankly is initiated when we receive development applications where we say there could be a hazard here. You homeowner that wants to do an addition and look at this, go study this hazard. If there's concern that there's a requirement in the ordinance that needs to be met and it's not being met, we are happy to look at that if there's a potential violation and if it's something that the city can enforce, certainly we do that. If it's a Salt Lake County Flood Control, who generally manages waterways throughout the county, we can get them involved.
Yeah, I mean, I
If
would
it's-
like to
if
better,
it's
I
somebody
don't know
else,
if
we
any of the
certainly
other
can do
council
that.
members have an interest in this, but I would like to understand who does regulate that and kind of, you know, where the buck stops on that.
Every drop of water is regulated. They've had passed some things in legislature this year that is metering, say, all the irrigation, which is mine, and I've got a meter on it now. But that water is accounted for. It has a caretaker. It has people downstream that own that water. And I'm sure it'd be to their best interest if somebody got a hold of them and said, you know what, this could be a hazard. And maybe we check with that irrigation company. It's got a name. Each one of them has a name. for the
Culvert,
irrigation.
the word that I was looking for was
Culvert.
culverts,
Yeah, there
that
you
the
go.
culverts could become blocked,
Yeah,
which would then create flooding.
right.
So.
But Mike's saying is, this is not a blanket thing. This is one by one if somebody has an issue, right?
Well, sensitive lands, evaluation and development standards inherently, the ordinance is structured to
For development.
kick in when a development of any size, that it could be, you know,
Or
any one of us
addition,
putting a
little
deck onto
addition.
our house and yeah, there might be a fault line here. I know it's a pain, but you got to go study that.
Yeah.
Because it is a public health, safety and welfare thing. It's not any sort of economic development tool or anything like that. If there's mismanagement of an existing condition that doesn't require permits or doesn't get our attention, we are happy to look at that and track that down. And if you can work with Tim or whoever, we can get on that.
Yeah, because that might, the circumstance you're talking about, potentially the SLEDS ordinance would help us with our authority to work with a company, the water company, and say, this is something that is of concern to the life, health, and safety of residents. And so this ordinance could be utilized for that. In general, though, it's mostly new development that comes through,
Right.
but it could be something that could be looked
And it's to their advantage to make sure it doesn't pose a problem because they would be liable for that.
Right. So just to finish up here, the technical update is underway. This was directed by the previous city council. So that was a council initiative a few years ago. It's taken a while, but it's very technical and substantial to work through it. It's been in front of the planning commission since January. The previous time the ordinance was updated was 2015. So a lot of this ordinance is just, we've got new best practices, we've got new expert resources out there. We're bringing all that in to enhance the ordinance. And frankly, it's getting very restrictive, which we think is a good thing. It promotes this health, safety, and welfare, especially in these very sensitive areas, which also coincides with the fact that our city is largely built out, and we're seeing more and more development applications in these very sensitive areas. So having strict standards in place, we believe, is a good thing. Through the planning commission process, numerous changes have been made, which again, at future council meetings, we'll get into kind of bit by bit. But we've made a lot of changes at the commission's request since January. And discuss this with as many experts as we've been able to find from UGS, the various universities, geologic experts, FEMA, the Forest Service, et cetera. So we have a lot of information behind this. Geostrata has also been instrumental in making recommendations for some of the geotechnical and geologic standards in here. So at some point in the next few months, we think the commission will make a recommendation to the city council, at which point the whole amendment will come to you for formal consideration, which will include public comment and as many work sessions or discussions as the council needs to be comfortable with it before taking formal action. And again, that's just the amendment. SLEDs exist today. We feel it's a good ordinance today. We use it a lot recently because there's a lot of development in sensitive areas. And we feel the update is just making it that much better and that much making sure we have the right information out there to make sure development's as safe as it can be as those requests come in.
Great. Well, thank you, Mike. That was, I know that's a lot, and we appreciate your attention to this matter. And like I said, we have a lot of citizens concerned, rightly so, and the council needs to do their due diligence and homework. So hopefully we will become really engaged in this process so that we can make correct decisions. So thank you.
Yeah, and there is, if you want to get a head start on your homework, all the staff reports and draft ordinances are on the Planning Commission webpage. They're out there for the public to review, and you can see all the changes we're proposing and every iteration of it, and read the staff analysis of what was added and what was changed and why, and it's all there.
Okay. So the next item under staff reports, we actually discussed in the review of the business meeting agenda. So we'll skip the Geostrata agreement and move to item C, which is ranked choice voting discussion. So a couple of meetings ago, you probably remember we had proponents for and against ranked choice voting come in and address us. So what I'd like to do is open up a discussion with the council to possibly make some decisions or to decide if we'd like to once again consider ranked choice voting in our next election cycle, or if we'd like to go back to the traditional primary and general election process that was used previous. So at this point, let me please give me some of your opinions.
Well, everybody's looking at me, so I can start off here. I did get, like I say, I've talked to a lot of the people. I was not part of the election, but I got many, many, many calls right up until probably 15 minutes until the voting deadline, saying, how do I, it wasn't the question of who do I vote for? It was more like, how does this work? Because of all the percentages where they go on the first, second, third choice. Do I put all the choices down? The other biggest problem I saw is trying to keep track of that many candidates in one shot is very difficult. People have very busy lifestyles, and trying to take care of two people is a little easier to keep track of. But when you have 5 or 6, it gets very confusing on really research. And many of us, I know many of us, at least maybe I'm speaking for other people, when you come to judges and some other things that are a little bit more obscure, until you can study as much as you can, but you go to cases they've had and where they stood on those cases. But it's very difficult when we only have 40% voter turnout to get that many people to study that much about who is actually out there and what they stand for, where they're at. I wish we could give people, and we could lock the door and kind of give them a whole maybe a tutorial on who's where, what we can do, because it's very difficult for people, especially that time of the year. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
And that has been my biggest feedback is they're like, man, this is brand new. This is difficult in that. Who do I vote for? Do I vote for a second person? Do I vote for a third person? And if I do, where does that put them in the next ranking? Where do those votes go? That's been the biggest negative. And I know Sandy City had a lot of that problem too.
Well, Sandy City also had a group that was purposely putting out bad information and incorrect information just to cause an issue. And so.
So it did open it up to that too. That was a vulnerability.
There certainly is a reason in any election and any election type to better improve education. As far as the number of candidates, that doesn't really change with that particular system. The nationwide results, and I had wished that we had gotten a better response from our county clerk to where we could actually have data to show exactly what did happen in Cottonwood Heights. But
Why can we not get that? We've asked for it, right?
well, and I don't remember. It was,
We requested it.
we did, and they'll say, well, we can only give you this. We can't give you the ballot record because there's a way the Utah law is written that says they can't use it to where you could get down to identifying information. The Utah County Clerk found a way to anonymize it enough that they felt sufficient in releasing that information. The Salt Lake County Clerk was unwilling to do so. So it's kind of hard to say exactly what happened here specifically, but if you do go and you look at the nationwide results and the way all of those things percolate down, the concern, there are a lot of the people, I mean, it wasn't Kyrene that was here.
It was Kyrene.
Kyrene, I mean, their stuff does track very well outside of Sandy, again, which had kind of a little of an aberration this time, that people tend to understand it and actually prefer it, and they would like to do it again. When you get down to some hard analysis of how do things actually pan out, it's not very often that a fourth, fifth, or sixth choice ever gets to the end. It's almost always first, second, or third, because that's usually one of those candidates that most people choose. It's not very common that someone chooses the outliers on any one election. It can happen. And I made this point with what was their name in the election? The other people that were talking about
Utah Election Initiative.
Exhausted votes, and I mean, I understand what you're saying about the lower turnout or the higher turnout. Doug, is actually was a bigger function of
mail-in voting.
Mail-in voting. Absolutely 100% that. And how many people you vote for. You know, again, their problems, some of those problems would go away if you say, well, yes, you have to vote for them all. We just went through a couple of years of various governmental agencies saying, mandating, you must do this. And it created a huge amount of problems. I think you probably have a similar amount of problems if you said, you must go out and vote, and you must vote for everybody, and you must do all this research. I don't think that would go over very well. So, you know, ultimately the response does get down to the individual voter. I think the mail-in voting is absolutely, we can't do away with it. We went the first.
I don't think that's being discussed at all, is it?
No, but the one group tied that all together. And one of our county clerk candidates came in and basically, and they've been very supportive of getting rid of mail-in voting and actually going straight to only in person, because it's the only secure way.
But our voting went from like what, 15% to 30%?
Cottonwood Heights was always really high.
But what was the highest we were before mailing? Voting.
The incorporation presidential election of 2004.
Presidential election, I'm talking about Cottonwood Heights.
But you got to remember, the first election the city had was during a presidential year. So the first mayor and council people were on a traditional high turnout ballot, and the turnout was close to 86. So there was a lot of interest in the city locally.
But after that, so
You were looking at 2025, which was still very, very high, certainly for a municipal election, because that's the range you would have gotten in a normal Murray, West Jordan type. In fact, the first primary that we cast, the turnout in West Jordan was under 10. And that was not uncommon. Sherry Swinson said that, well, boy, it'd be really nice if we get more people to vote. It's one of the reasons we opted to do the mail-in was because we thought it would help, and it has kept us so that instead of 10% of the people exercising their right, you move that up to 40, you get a lot better.
I hope we don't use 10% as a, well, we're doing great at 40 is what I'm saying.
There's certainly better, it would certainly be nice if there was what I would say is compared to what it was before that. I think it is quite a bit better.
So let's get some more opinions. Thank you, Scott. Let's, Councilmember Burrell, tell me what some of your thoughts.
Yes, I concur with Councilmember Bracken that we have to remember that municipal elections are always far lower in voter turnout.
Well, I didn't contest that. That's always.
I
been the
mean,
case.
yeah, so I think this last, our first effort at ranked choice voting, the feedback that I got from constituents that I talked to in District 4, but also around Cottonwood Heights, found it actually quite intriguing to have a slate of candidates that they could investigate. I think it's always a challenge to get information beyond what is in the candidates, brochure, which of course is going to extol each person. So I thought it was beneficial that the Utah League of Women Voters had a campaign candidate forum, I should say, candidate forum, and we had really good participation. I mean, looking back, I'm trying to think of a given candidate that didn't participate in that. So I think that we could have done a better job on broadcasting that information to our population here in Cottonwood Heights of the opportunities to hear candidates speak, especially at an event like that. But I like the idea that more potential candidates feel that they have entry with ranked choice voting because it tends to be a shorter period of time versus having to go into a primary situation where you spend a lot of time and money and resources trying to get through a primary. I think that it makes it more accessible for more people to run for a city office if they have in this last year. Of course, it was an August 10th or 11th deadline to register. Which I think, again, opened it up to more people. I know in my district, there were only 3 of us who ran, and even for the mayoral seat, it was 5 for the mayors. So
5 or 6 and 3.
So, and I just want to also say that I also think that any given voter, if they feel confused or they don't know some of the candidates, again, they don't have to vote for every single person that appears on a ranked choice voting ballot. And so I believe that that's a positive for ranked choice voting because the given voter can vote for those who they are familiar with and leave the others off. They don't have to.
Yeah, I agree. They
fill it out.
don't have to, Ellen, but they didn't know.
Well, that was a communication glitch. I mean, communication is our greatest challenge. I think we keep trying to improve things. I mean, democracy is better than the alternative. It's not perfect, a representative government. So I think we try to learn from what was confusing to people and try to improve it. I think that Paula Melger did a really good job But she had to like take what she was getting from the county and then convey it to the citizens of Cottonwood Heights. And I think it would be beneficial to perhaps have a debrief. I'm not aware. I'd really love that, to learn from what Paula learned on behalf of her major role for the city, and just look at ways to improve the communication so that there is less confusion if we were to use ranked choice voting again, which I will just go on record as saying that I do favor ranked choice voting.
Great.
I wish we-
Council member, oh, sorry.
Just one thing, I wish we had a couple candidates, especially one that jumped out months before. I almost wish we could say, don't start throwing that stuff out, because that went out months before.
And we
And
did that, could we say,
can we say, don't start?
They do it in other countries. They say, hey, you get as
Well,
few as
I
2 or
What I,
4
what I
weeks.
think you would find is, Mr. Topham would cite you the First Amendment.
yeah,
It says you can ask nicely, but you cannot.
But it was frustrating to see it go out
Because it is.
so many months.
It's stinking 5th of July, so we're only a day past all that,
Yeah, there was-
Constitution stuff that we like.
signs this last cycle was when up in March. So Councilmember Newell, if you're still on the line, I'd love to get your opinion.
Yes, nationally, ranked choice voting has been received as very favorable. It was a mechanism that's been designed to improve or work to improve voter turnout, and also to reduce the cost of having a primary. Primaries are basically more effective and still utilized in partisan races, and most municipalities are in nonpartisan races. The information as far as learning about the candidates is twofold. It's the responsibility of the candidate to put out information so that people know who they are, what they're all about, what they're running for, and then also for those that are voting to do the research. We can't handhold people in these processes for a continuous basis. Now, for Cottonwood Heights, there was training offered twice to citizens to be able to learn how ranked choice voting works. And then also, again, that responsibility falls on them to do some research and study in lieu of having others try to be their voice and teach them, when we haven't had a train the trainer for many of us that were trying to speak to the intricacies of ranked choice voting. I found it very effective, and I found that it was easy to explain once you sat people down, but we really don't have the time to do that on a regular basis. And I was so glad that we had those that were willing to step up to be able to help people out. I think we are going to have to add to Ellen's statement. I think we're going to have to add to creating some mechanisms to create clarity for people to better understand how the system works, how the voting works once their votes have been cast, and then understanding their responsibilities as voters to do some of that legwork, to do some of that research, without counting on hearsay, without counting on he says, she says, and getting to the facts of what each candidate is actually standing for.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilmember New. I think that's those are great comments. So let me add my thoughts, if that's okay at this point. So my biggest concern and challenge was not knowing who your competition is. And sometimes in a group of 5, that's hard to know. Sometimes anyway, so one of the things that I thought was fascinating that we learned about the last when we brought these people in, and this was what I would recommend, and we don't have to do it, but so when we have, for example, with Sandy, when they had 9 people running for mayor, it's not realistic to research 9 candidates. People are not going to do that. You can, and you might end up ranking 1, 2, or 3. But so one of the things that we did learn is that we could do a ranked choice voting in a primary to narrow it to 2. But I think the process of having one or the other, so we would have a ranked choice voting primary to narrow to 2 candidates. If there were only 2, they would both go on to the general election, but then we would still have a general election between two candidates instead of 9 in one vote. One of the things that would do is very few would not vote in that general. If you voted in the primary, we had a lot of voters, whether you like it or not, that only cast one ballot. They did not feel comfortable voting for more than one person. This is the person they wanted, and they just didn't vote for anybody else. And I know that goes against everything that ranked choice voting is, but it's still how those citizens felt.
That's perfectly okay, though.
Yeah, and it is.
You have that choice.
It is okay.
If you only like Mike,
But if Mike doesn't make it to the final 2, they've basically given up their ability to have a stronger opinion. So if we had ranked choice voting in a primary and to narrow it to 2, we would mostly get the opportunity to get this to the benefits of both options. And we would have the ability to rank a lot of people that submit their name and to narrow it to 2, but then be able to contrast yourself.
May I
between
ask,
the top
Mayor,
2. Sure.
that's such an intriguing idea. Is this being done in other cities, what you
Provo
just described?
considered
Provo is
it. I don't
doing
know
it?
if
Oh, are they considering it?
they did. I don't know if they actually did.
Mayor, with all due respect, if you're saying that there's a problem researching 9 candidates for the election, wouldn't there be a problem researching 9 candidates for a primary? Because you still have to research who you're going to vote on a primary, and it's still the same number of candidates.
Correct, but so let's say that you've got 2 really similar candidates, Bob, and this person only wants to vote for one. And well, the other really similar candidate ends up winning. So they only cast the ballot for that one person. In a general election, they would be able to research again and go, oh, that candidate still pretty much aligns with my views. I'm going to vote for them. Whereas in the ranked choice voting model, they didn't. They just cast that one vote and didn't have a determination past that. And so
Well, that's why I'm disappointed in the detail, because I've got the detailed results from other cities and counties,
I
Santa Fe
agree.
specifically, that
we don't have that.
but that's what I'm saying is, if you only want to take the time to do 3, there's anywhere between 2/3 and 93-4-5% chance that your vote is going to be in the final tally with whoever, either the win or the second person. So again, those 4th, 5th, 6th, if someone's not going to go that deep, I would have to go back and look. The people who only vote 1 tend to be also a minority, a fairly significant minority. I'm not saying up to 48%. I think those the most people by default, most being 50, 60, 65% range, vote all the way down the ballot, whether they know them sometimes or not.
Right.
So it's kind of like, I guess, the judges or some of those, sure, why not? We'll give a yes, or for whatever reason. So and to be clear, I liked it. I think the biggest advantage for candidates and for people is maybe not having things months and months and months ahead. It shortens it up. I am not, however, in favor of ranked choice voting in partisan elections. I think it works for nonpartisan elections like Cottonwood Heights, especially with single person seats. It gets a little more confusing when you're having vote for 3.
Yeah.
So we don't fall into that category. For us, I think it works really well. I don't like what I've seen on some of those results when it gets to a result, unless it's, if you were, for example, going to do a Democratic primary or Republican Party where everyone was the same candidate, then I could see it working, but not on a general. That's personally kind of what I've seen. I would, if we all of a sudden had to put letters by our name, then I would probably say differently, but I like that it shortened things.
Yeah.
So that's
So we don't have to make a decision obviously today, but I thought it's a healthy discussion to do that.
I think we probably do need to make the decision
Sooner than
before
later.
the end of the year.
Yes, I agree. I think
So
waiting
people
till
will
May
know.
last year was too long.
Yeah.
I think the goal should 100% to have it done before the end of the
So
year.
so which whatever we're doing, we can, again, it's this education and getting things out. This is what's gonna happen. These are the timeframes, because you're right, last year we kind of got you need to tell us by like next Tuesday.
We were a month away from the primary from the, if we would have done the regular.
Yeah, it was a little kludgy. We know more now.
Okay, great. So we have a next item under staff reports is community fiber optics. And so I wanted to bring this up for a couple of reasons. So we have, in full disclosure, we have Comcast coming to our next meeting. Okay, but Comcast is a different animal than a fiber to fiber provider. And so we want to hear about Comcast and let them present like the others have. But I think it's also important that we start discussing what we think our options are. And I'll have to be frank and honest. I don't know if they're great. Because in one model, we have to guarantee and put the city on the hook for a lot of finances if they don't meet their quotas. The other one is tearing up our streets in a manner.
Utopia,
Google,
Google.
and then CenturyLink, who's I was really disappointed, to be honest with you, in
They
their
didn't give a very
presentation.
strong-
And so
What was the most disappointing things for you about CenturyLink?
they didn't have answers to many of the questions. I wanted to know if they'd come in and go to
Yeah,
all of our
their target
cities. It's almost
goal was not fiber to the home.
it's not, yeah, their goal is to not get fiber to every one of our
But Mayor,
houses.
there's another entity that we haven't heard from that I thought we were going to hear from. Remind me the name of it.
Well, Comcast,
There's another one. Does it start with an M? What's the other one? There's another big player we haven't heard from.
Really?
I don't know.
Wasn't Google,
Yeah,
wasn't Utopia. There was another, I thought there was another entity.
I don't, I'll take this back if I'm wrong, but you may have Meta on the brain.
So there's a company
No,
called
it isn't.
Quantum, but Quantum is a DBA of
Quantum? I thought there was another.
CenturyLink. And so
That's right. Another one?
Thought there was one more entity. And it wasn't Centawave, I don't believe.
there was an entity that was at the Utah League of Cities and Towns, but it was more,
oh yeah.
It's not geared to what we need.
they do a lot more rural, and I don't recall the name of them, but you're right on that. There's that group, and we can reach out to them.
Could we have a deadline where
So-
we think, let's make a decision?
There's no
or-
deadline,
no
but I
deadline?
want to bring something up for discussion. And one of the reasons I did this was the previous council and Google were pretty close to signing a contract. One of the reasons that we backed up, correct me, Tim, if I say anything wrong, was that, the road issue. So I would like possibly to engage them to possibly enhance what they normally do with cities, to perhaps ask for better guarantees on how long they'll guarantee the patching that they've made, at least. So to me, I don't see option A, Utopia, as a great option. Google, if we could figure out the road issue and have them make some guarantees that maybe they haven't made in the past. Maybe they're willing, maybe they're not. But I would like to go down that road to possibly look at them doing some of the things that we asked before that they didn't say yes
I
on.
wish Matt Ship was here so that we could say, Matt's not online.
No,
I wish, because they talked about originally, we heard 3 inches to 4 inches. Now we hear 8 to 12. And they showed us Sandy, which was probably their best case scenario, let's be honest. But if there was a way to get that where Matt could say, you know what, if it's at this level, that will not be a problem. That's where I wish we could be, but I don't know that there's ever not a problem. And if we do run into them, whose dime is it? Is it our city or is it Google's?
And that's been the result, is it typically ours. So the real cost to Google isn't the infrastructure and running the stuff. It's, to me, it's going back and re-maintaining the infrastructure. Doing all of our, we're doing $8 to $9 million a year on our roads right now on the budget, to keep them where they are, that's where that cost is. The other big, and this is strictly a philosophical feeling but I think it's absolutely critical that we understand. People seem very willing and able, and they do it on an enormous amount to turn all of the information they get online and about themselves and their phones. They're basically, if it's Apple or Google, they know about 97% of everything everybody does. Now, I asked them that question. They said, well, we're a different entity. Okay. But one of the real advantage I see to Utopia is that because that network is run by governments, there's specifically restrictions. There's restrictions. You can't go snooping in it. That's a violation of the amendments. If you sign away when you hit, I agree on every single app there, you're given your permission to give away all that data. And so, yes, there's a cost to Utopia, but there's also some of that protection in line as far as, what happens if
Privacy.
right. I have done it. I mean, Google knows more about me than I probably wish that they did. But it does get that's where I see an advantage to Utopia, because it is a government-based thing. And I know for some people that probably comes up as a negative, but I see it as that's because we can't go into the data mining, we can't go into the metadata and start figuring all of these things. Google says they won't, and as long as they don't, you're not doing anything crazy to where you get looked at, you have a sense of privacy. So
I think that's a valid point.
and that's the one I struggle with is it better for us to do with a consortium that we know is mandated by law to stay out of your data streams, or do you just give it to somebody else who's doing it and you're gonna trust them to stay out?
I think that's a valid point.
So, if I may,
Can I ask two questions?
oh, is that Sean?
That's
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Ask two questions. One, why are we looking at in a singular view for one specific provider when we already know that the city has a number of different providers that are already here? And second, if we're considering future technology, I was speaking to some of the people at AT&T, and they're looking at modemless internet capabilities. And they're not the only ones. There's companies like AT&T and Verizon and others that are looking at this new technology where there won't be a fiber cable. So, if we jump the gun and we're starting to try to push for one or the other, I want to know why we have to look at it, giving our handshake to one when we are already being served by a number of providers now throughout the city. There are places where people are not being served, but that has to be considered, I'm sure. But then also being conscious of the fact that future technology is coming fast. What are we going to do then?
So some really good points, Sean. Let me address a couple of them. So for us, I think most of us would admit, talking to us constituents, that being able to get better, faster, more secure internet to every home is a priority. I had multiple people while I was campaigning say, hey, you've got to get fiber to my home. So a couple of the challenges that you're talking about, Sean, CenturyLink has a completely different model. They go through over the air right of ways that they own currently, is that right? So that and they are not interested as of now of getting to our entire city. So we would just have to be okay with a company like CenturyLink not telling some residents, hey, you're not ever going to get fiber. Have the option to get fiber to your home, which will include some of the great things that the fiber option. Utopia and Google need our council's permission to use our right of way to lay the fiber under our roads to then get that same fiber to each household. So
Yeah.
One of the
Well,
reasons,
and that-
John, that I also have a struggle with Utopia is Utopia has a long-term 30+ year that we're on the hook. Whereas what you're talking about, technology could change in 5 to 10 years with something better. And that's why the Google option to me is that we're not on the hook for anything. So,
Yeah.
but great point, Sean. Great, what's that?
Our streets.
Our streets, exactly. Our streets.
It's not free.
There is not a great answer. I have really struggled over this. There is just not one that
How
pops
do we
out.
know
to me.
what percentage of people, and I'm not very respectfully, you have your anecdotal evidence that vocal constituents, want fiber into every home. But statistically, I don't know, will that come out in this Y2 analytics survey we have? How important is it to our population? What percentage of them truly desperately want fiber into their home versus what percentage are happy with their CenturyLink at $45 a month, or they feel that it's adequate, meets their needs. And is there a way for the people who want that fiber link to get the high speed and the things they need by paying some, I don't know, extra amount to have? I mean, is there a way to meet the needs of those who really want the fiber? I'm trying to ascertain, is it really necessary to go into every one of our 22,000 households or whatever the number
I
is?
can tell you that without fail, since 2006, I get comments and requests and demands and snarky letters and why haven't you done this already? Comments that they come in from day one. Utopia wasn't a great choice 16 years ago. They had a different financial structure. You can talk to Tim in detail if you'd like to hear about some of those things. Google wasn't even out there. So it is becoming more of a expectation rather than and as far as alternative technologies, same discussion happening 20 years ago when I started following it, a little bit more than that when I started getting into it with some of my employment. And people have always asked that question, but at the core of everything, it's still fiber.
Yeah, but I think Councilmember Bra has great points. So I think that's a valid. Let me give you what my argument would be. Work from home is I think just going to grow, and so more and more households I think are going to be in the need of having reliable internet coverage during the day. What happens with my provider, I won't mention them, when their network gets too busy, they purposely slow it down so that everybody can get a piece, can get something. And the problem with that is then the that's when the spinning happens and you get kicked off your network and as a work from home person, that's an issue. And there are multitudes, I promise, people within our city that have that issue.
It's one of the biggest, that Council Bracken mentioned, one of the biggest beefs that I have from my constituents. The problem is, like Sean mentioned, there are new technologies out, but they're out too far right now. I happen to have a very strong connection and know a little bit about fiber. And I've asked them the same thing because some of these cities are looking at signing these longer term agreements. It's too far out. Starlink, all these other things, these options. The problem is to make it even more difficult is we need more speed, more information is flowing. Everything we take is taking more and more information. I mean, we need that flow. But I think we're a tightrope here. What do we do? Do we make a bad decision because we have to? Do we want to damage our roads? Do we get into a long-term contract? 30 years is unbelievable to think somebody would hold you out that far. 20 years to me. I think it's at least 20 years.
I think it is.
But the technology
with the bonding.
Yeah, 20 years in today's technology is a long time. And so here we are balancing this. But I do, and a lot of people are working from home now, or when they get home, they can't do what they want to do. I don't use the kind of data right now that other people in my neighborhood are using, but they're going, we got to do something.
There's a lot of home-based businesses.
Yeah, a lot of home base, and their information, they're coming and going now. Remember the old days when you had a computer that had a little bit of RAM and we kept adding and adding and adding? You'd laugh at the RAM that we used to have now, the speed. The fiber is,
Again,
if you don't have a gig now.
25 years ago, the concept of a 1.5 megabit connection was just like, oh, wouldn't that be great? And now people are talking about, well, I want a gig, I want 1,000. I think, I think there's a demand to do it.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Councilmember No.
Yeah, I think balance is the key word here. We have to find a way to balance the decisions that we make with what is going to come down the pike eventually. I agree. I can't see us going into a 20-year agreement because that's going to tie us up when things do shift. I agree that there's going to be more and more people working from home. So we have to find a way to be able to provide service to, I believe, all of our residents in a way that's effective, but in ways that we can mitigate future disparities that are created from our decision. We don't want to get caught in that trap where we create our own demise.
So thank you, and I agree. One of the things to consider is I think we are now in Salt Lake County one of 3 municipalities that do not have Google or Utopia. So every other municipality has either in process or built out a fiber option to every home in their city. So it's the city's put this off for a long time. So I do think that 100% we have to be cautious, but I also think it's easy. I think it might be easy to push it down the road and instead of making a hard decision sometimes. So this is why I wanted to open up this decision. Let's hear from Comcast in a couple of weeks.
Things have changed a lot even in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
The one thing to remember about Google, they don't play well with anybody else.
It's just their own fiber.
A lot of these other companies, they will let other companies branch on and you rent that line, that main trunk. And then other things can come into whether it's HOAs or whatever neighborhoods, but they will play fairly with other companies. And so
Utopia lays the fiber and they allow a retailer to come in and sell it.
So just keep that in mind.
It's a structural difference, and it's that philosophical difference is what you're going to pay one way or the other. It's how do you want to do it, and as it were,
Hopefully our citizens will realize we're taking this serious and that we're trying to come up with a solution that's the
well,
best.
and I would like to say, Mayor, that I think that your idea, everything's negotiable. Why not see if we can get some kind of a special contract that Google doesn't offer to other cities? Maybe they didn't negotiate hard enough. I mean, I think that's fascinating. And I also think, I believe it was Councilman Peterson that brought up, again, bringing Matt Shipp back into this conversation and really figure out what our ask would be to try to protect our streets and then reconvene again.
And I'm completely comfortable with that. I will just say that Shane and Matt and I were the 3 that really worked hard at the negotiation and pushed as hard as we could, which they backed off at that point. And so I think it's completely feasible to go forward again and push harder. But Shane knows we did everything we could to get our interests protected, and they walked away.
They wouldn't even give us what they had given Salt Lake City. So they have a cookie cutter.
I think it's
their way or the highway.
I think it's worth addressing again, and we might get the same answer.
Yeah.
And we might not. But anyway, I think it's been healthy that we talk about this. One of the things that my last maybe pro for Google is, like Sean mentioned, if a new technology comes out in 5 years, well, that's Google's fault. We are not on the hook for a single penny. right?
Yeah.
For what Google does, other than roads. You keep. in
Oh,
mind-
just a little thing like our.
We have to.
Well, I mean,
update our roads,
because
update our
unfortunately,
roads.
there's public perception that Google's free.
Yeah,
But I have seen some of the contractors that have done work for Google, and it's not what we saw in Sandy.
and that's
just
what
so
I
you
would
know.
be interested in, making sure that
Yeah.
that they would have to.
If we want to take a little tour, I can show you
And
some
that's,
pretty
That-
bad.
yeah.
work.
and that's what we have to decide. You can pay for it now in a bond, or you can pay for it.
Later.
Okay, well, thank you, council. I really appreciate it and staff. So the next item is item 4, which is a review of calendars and upcoming events. Planning Commission meetings tomorrow at City Hall starting at 5 p.m. Council meetings on July 19th at City Hall starting at 4. City Hall will be closed in observation of Pioneer Day on July 25th. That's a Monday. Cottonwood Heights Butlerville Days, July 28th to 30th. Volunteers and sponsors needed. Just as an aside to that, there were some tragic events that happened at parades. I actually engaged Paul or Ann Etchell with Tim this morning to review our policies and procedures on parades. And we are going to come up with some actual policies that we will communicate to anybody in our parade to make sure that we know this is really important. The police are going to we're going to have extra engagement as we look at, how we can
Do
make
you
sure
mind
that
just sharing an
the parade is safe.
example? I'm sorry that I don't seem to be.
I'm out
up
of
to
the loop
speed.
as well. I've been-
So, yeah, well-
Kaysville, an 8-year-old girl fell under a float and died
Oh,
over the 4th.
oh,
Was she on the float or?
We
in the-
don't know exactly what happened, but
That's the last thing you want to hear.
it's the last thing you want to hear. That happened in Harriman
Oh, right.
Another.
3 or 4 years ago. And
Oh.
so the purpose for me engaging them is that we want to make sure that our parade is going to be safe. So we're gonna create policies and procedures, make sure that they be followed. So, and then the other thing obviously is the shooting that happened. So in I think Illinois. So anyway, things that we're cognizant and that we will be aware about as we look to having our parade. So there's a movie in the park, Sing 2 on July 29th at Butler Park, 9 p.m. City Council meeting on August 2nd.
Yeah, July
29th, yeah.
I thought I heard June.
No, July 29th.
So that's during Butler Hip Building.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
second day of Butlerville Days. Movie in the park, Spider-Man No Way Home will be on August 12th at Butler Park. It's starting at 9 p.m. And council meetings on August 16th, starting at 4. And future council meetings will be September 6th and 20th, October 4th and 18th, November 1st and 15th, December 6th and 20th. Just as for transparency's sake. Okay, so we do have an item to discuss in a closed session today. So we will be discussing a property acquisition matter. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn our work session and enter into a closed session unless you have.
Can I just comment? So Councilmember Newell, we are in process of creating the link for this closed session. So we want to make sure you have access into it. So Matt will be sending if the council goes into a closed session, but Matt will be sending a link, correct?
Yeah, with a phone number and a link.
With a phone number and a link. So just hang tight for just a minute. You'll receive that shortly.
So I'll suggest that we go about 7 or 8 minutes, 5 to 7, 8 minutes and take a quick break.
I
And,
move that we close the work session and prepare for a closed meeting after a short break.
and I will second that if we can grab our dinner to eat while we're in the closed session. Selfishly.
I think nobody would disagree. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Sorry, Sean. About the
Oh,
meal.
no,